Hi, I'm Laura.
I'm Deanne.
And I'm Philippe.
Welcome to our Lymond book club. We are reading Queen's Play by Dorothy Dunnett, and we're on section 2, and we're actually going to cover chapters 3, 4, and 5 within this section. Dee is going to lead the discussion, but before we start, we're going to give our overall thoughts and impressions on these chapters. Philippe, do you want to go first?
Sure. These chapters really sort of ramped up the action for me. I wouldn't say disappointed is how I felt after the last two chapters. They were just a bit different from what we had been reading so far. So I think things got a little bit more interesting this time around. Lymond's really starting to lose it, I feel. Like, I don't know. Something's going on with him. He's slipping too far into the act of playing Tatty Boy, just with the whole rooftop segment that we're going to probably spend a good amount of time on. Yeah. I still think D'Aubigny is not up to any good, and I have more thoughts about that, which I don't think I want to share until we get to those specific parts, but yeah. I did enjoy that last chapter, the rooftop. I wouldn't call it a chase, but it almost felt like a chase. So
It's a chase. I mean, I think it was a race. Yeah. I thought these chapters were okay. Like, it was fine. I loved the scene between George Douglas and Lymond that we'll get to. That was great. That was a great exchange. I felt like, and I really loved the part where he confronts Jenny Fleming. I like that bit too. I wasn't so fond of the steeplechase part because I just don't really care. Like, it was, to me, it was just like, it was just boys being boys, and it was like a game of pickup football or whatever. Just, they were just running across rooftops and, trying to outdo each other, and everybody was drunk and they got themselves way in over their heads, and like, whatever. I just didn't care. It's like, whatever. The only thing I cared about it was where, like, at the very end on the tower, where Robin and Lymond sort of are gonna like sacrifice themselves for each other, and so there's like this scene where Robin does this heroic move, Lymond does a heroic move, Robin does a heroic move. Like, that was nice. Other than that, I was like, whatever.
yeah, I especially liked the character growth of Robin Stewart in that chapter.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I love that section I actually love the way she writes it. I love the adrenaline rush. I love the adventure of it, but the whole thing is seen through Robin's eyes. So it's very much a character thing. Like, this is the best night of his life. This is this incredible inspiration for him. This is this like non-romantic falling in love with Chatty Boy for him. And this is like this desperately lonely person who wants more than anything to fit in and belong and to live up to the potential that he thinks he has, having all of his dreams come true in this way that is actually really heartbreaking because it doesn't mean anything to Lymond. And it means the whole world to Robin.
That's why I didn't care about it, because it was like Robin was having this wonderful experience, and like, it was great. It was adrenaline, he was having this adrenaline rush and getting to be the partner of Tatty Boy and like, belong in this thing. And I just want them to sit down in front of a fire and have a conversation. Like, I just don't care. Like, it doesn't mean anything. And it's like, I think it all speaks to the fact that Robin has really terrible priorities. And there's actually a really explicit point in the earlier chapters where that's super obvious. And it's just like, I mean, it's been obvious the whole time. Like, Robin thinks the wrong things are going to make him happy. And he still thinks that. Like, it's not, I don't think he's grown in that area at all. Like, he still wants, like, he wants to belong, but he doesn't want to belong in a way that's actually going to make him happy. Like, this doesn't mean anything to, like, he's not doing something that's actually going to connect him to Lymond in a real relationship mentor friendship kind of way. And like, he doesn't know how to get that. He doesn't know what he wants. He doesn't know how to get what he wants. And I'm starting to be afraid that he's just going to end up to be a tragic character and like never get what he wants. And that makes me sad. Like, I hope that he'll grow. I hope that he'll grow. And maybe we'll end up at the end of the book with like a Will Smith or Will,
Scott.
I say Will Smith. Will.
Scott.
Scott, thank you. Why am I blanking on his name? Maybe I'll end up like Will Scott, where he like has an epiphany and sort of figures things out at the end. But I definitely do not think this was an epiphany moment for him. Like, I do feel like he loved it and he enjoyed it. But to me, that was sad because it was like this rollicking adventure, adrenaline rush thing is the best night of his life. Like, that's sad. It's not a good thing. That shouldn't be the best night of his life. It should be something that gives him a genuine connection to someone else. So.
I wonder what his obligations toward France are. Like, why can't he just pick up and leave? Like, I know he's part of the Royal Archers, and like, maybe is it some sort of like fraternity for life kind of idea, or?
Well, he literally says in these chapters that he would have left weeks ago if it had Patty Boy. So he clearly is able to leave, unless he's lying about that. Like, he doesn't have, maybe it's just a job, so he just sticks around because he has a job.
I think that's basically it. He sticks around because he has a job. All right, shall we dive in?
Sure.
Okay. So the king is going to arrive, but before he does, we've had the hunt. Oh, by the way, I don't know if this is important, but before we start these chapters, I actually went back and read a large portion of the hunt chapter just because I was trying to figure out who was where when. What I was really trying to figure out was who can we tell who let the rabbit go from what's said. And I don't think we can, but it seems like, unless I'm reading it wrong, it seems like St. Andre didn't do it, because the way that she writes it, he is talking to the little queen. Like, it says St. Andre on foot at Mary's side was checking a saddle girth. What looks like simultaneously to when somebody had the rabbit like on their, like, hanging off their waist or whatever in the game bag, releasing the rabbit. Also, interestingly, Taddy says, Liam makes a comment like, Taddy boy, between this and no one murdering me at all, it's a poor day you've had. This is right before the whole rabbit chase thing. And then Taddy replies, Obby still, the day is not over. They're worse off. Like, he spoke too soon. Said Taddy, acknowledging the unexpected thrust, neither in dark face nor flat voice. Look at Pater and the legs on him like honey bags. Then the horn blowing the rights. So he says something about Pater Dooley having like the legs on him like honey bags, and right after that is when we get the whole 2 rabbit split hunt thing. So I just thought that was weird. I don't necessarily have a conclusion, but I thought it was weird. And St. Andre was both at the menagerie and was one of the people who had access to the arsenic. So he was on my list of, the list of bad people. But he also seems like he wasn't the person who released the rabbit, because he was literally on foot talking to the queen when it happened. So who knows?
I like your observations. So, they are interesting.
This does not help my this doesn't help my understanding of the plot very well, or like a theory. I have not developed a theory from any of that. I'm still suspicious of Pater Dooley just because he's hanging around and we just don't know very much about him. Sort of for the same reason I'm still suspicious of Dabney. Like, what's he doing? But I don't know. I'm more suspicious of Dabney than I am of Pater. Okay, so back to the king is coming. Before that, though, so Margaret writes, I love this. Margaret writes to Tom and says, "Your lantern lissome of light is possessed of devils," meaning Lymond. And then Tom, the book says that Tom wonders what barbaric enfranchisement of soul or of body he was devising for himself and for his sponsors now. So somehow Lymond is going to have a barbaric enfranchisement of soul or body. So that sounds fun. So the king and the rest of the entourage arrive, and we have this scene where the young queen and Oliamro have a little discussion, and he has this lovely moment where he basically tells her that the rabbit and the dog are in heaven. Like, I mean, kind of that's the implication. Like, he tells him like there's this like folktale, they're, you know, eating good food and running under the sun, and like, you know, they're happy and they'll be happy for years and years and all of that. So it was such a tender moment to care for a child in that way and not ignore her.
And they're actually the two people in the hunt that both lost you know, a beloved pet. So they have something in common, and they actually have a genuine human connection.
Yeah, and they get to have a moment, and that was just really sweet. I really liked it. And then we get this the sense that the security around the queen has been upped. So there's a moment where he says, Lymond is talking about, so by Lymond's laws, they were bound now in an unbreakable fence about the queen. So clearly Lymond somehow has taken over her security in some way, or has now like made the rules that everyone's following. So it says there was no second of the day when an Erskine or a Fleming was not at her side. Only Jenny, popular, resilient, was exempt while they waited for the shadow of death or accident to fall again. And I just put, like, they don't trust Jenny. Like, I don't think it's that she's exempt. I think that they don't trust her to guard the queen.
Yeah, she's not responsible.
For good reason. She's not responsible, exactly. So
we see happen.
The Dowager Queen was super mad about the hunt. And what were you saying? Sorry.
I said we'll see that happen in real time later, that Jenny's not responsible. So
she is not, and perhaps is deliberately not responsible. I mean, who knows? Okay, so then we had a bit that I didn't really understand. Oliamro has these interactions for the next chapter or so with Una and Madame Boyle, etc. And there's this line at the top of 156 where it says, since Mistress Boyle, in her positive, eccentric way, had apparently forgotten the whole episode, he resumed his relationship with the lady and her niece, adopting with pleasure their wide circle of friends. Wasn't Madame Boyle just like super mean? Like, I don't understand why it's her prerogative to, she'd have apparently forgotten the whole episode, so everything's fine. Like,
I think this speaks to Oliamro's character more than anything else. I mean, so Teresa Boyle, like, just kind of acted in her typical, you know, self, which is super over the top and like friendly. And so he, being Oliamro, being super chill, being not someone to stir the waters, is like, okay, I'll go with it and just pretend it didn't happen, because like these are the only other Irish people here. I don't have that many other people to hang out with. I'll just go back to hanging out with them. Plus he likes Una, so he just goes back to hanging out and pretending like Teresa Boyle isn't horrible.
She's horrible. So many horrible people in this book.
But Una is not horrible. Notice the trace of courtesy lacking before that Una shows to Oliamro.
I do not think that means she's not horrible. I think she is perhaps changing her tune a little bit.
She's changing her tune a little bit.
I have not forgiven her for her previous behavior. She's gonna have to do something pretty spectacular to get me to think she's okay, because
You mean the thing she said about the tennis court? That
Yes!
it was
I'm still mad at her for that. I don't think she has not redeemed herself yet.
I want to find out the reasons why she did that before I place any sort of blame on her. She can either go either one of two ways for me at the moment, and I still don't know how to feel about her. So
What are the two?
If there's some justification, I will listen to it, and I am willing to change my mind about her. But so far, she has not given. There has been no justification that warrants what she did. So,
Philippe, what are the two ways you could see her going?
well, she either purposely meant for him to come to some harm by sending him to the king like that, or she wanted to make a fool out of him so he would leave, to get out. So maybe she was trying to protect him because he's Irish and she doesn't want him getting caught up in the machinations of the French court. I don't know.
I don't see the second one because I don't think she's that stupid. Like, I think she's smart. And I think for her to have just intended to humiliate him without risking him, she'd have to not understand how the court worked and I don't think she's that dumb. Like, I think she really did. She might not have intended to kill him, but I think she did deliberately put him at risk. And there has got to be some sort of massive justification for that to warrant putting this guy who I think is he's pretty great. I mean, he's not, except for the fact that he needs to get off his butt politically. But I mean, he's a nice guy, and there's got to be I don't know what the justification for that is, but she hasn't given it.
I think there's just more we need to discover about her still, obviously, but
we'll see. So we get a slight glimpse into just the amount of work that Lymond is doing and how exhausted he probably is. It talks about how Oliamro doesn't see this amount of work that he's doing. But it says his playing had become as fashionable as a drug. He made music in public and in private for them all. The king, the queen, Diane, the constable and Conde, Dangan, and the Decases, Marguerite, and already they thought nothing and less than nothing of how he looked. Then, and here's an interesting bit, then the goal reached, he hardened his long fingers in their entrails of icing and sugar and started to twist. And then we get some pretty textual evidence that Lymond is bi, because it says, Oliamro, coming back to his chamber now and then, found the door locked against him, and a woman's voice, sweet and unrecognizable, spoke once when he rattled, which I think what they're saying is, no, you can't come in. The man, he's accompanied. I think that's what that says. The next time the voice was a man's, but it ceased as soon as Oliamro rapped. So clearly Lymond is entertaining both men and women.
So not only that, but Lymond is sleeping with them in the bed that he shares with Oliamro.
Yeah, and locking the door against him. Like, yeah. You can't come in, sorry.
Which just reminds me very much of like college kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
sharing a dorm room.
One knob.
Yeah. I like also there's a bit right before that. It says Oliamro's face would admit a certain avuncular pride. Tatty Boy could talk, and he was a pet of a listener as well. So like Oliamro has a little bit of like pride that his Olive is so popular, even though this isn't really your Olive and he's not really Irish, but he's still got a little pride in him.
He's still like, that's my guy.
What do you think it means he hardened his long fingers in their entrails of icing and sugar and started to twist?
Well, if we're saying like entrails like guts, so like he's sticking his hand in their guts and starting to twist, I think it's whatever plan that he has with this French court, is starting to come to fruition. Like he's starting to move in ways that will make whatever happen. And it sounds super uncomfortable. So the icing and sugar, like their guts are icing and sugar. We've seen that before, like the image of the court as like this just sugary fake milk.
The court of marzipan and kisses.
Yeah, the court of marzipan and kisses. But but the whole image of entrails is kind of gross. So it's like, again, this like there's this covering of sweetness, but the covering of sweetness is over something that's dark and like not pleasant.
So he's playing music for them. He's having sex with them. And how is he twisting?
Do we know?
We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. He's just, whatever it is he's doing it.
But he's definitely gathering information because I think they're all willing to speak freely in front of this Olive because he's just basically a servant to them.
Yeah. Somebody to use and to be entertainment and not even perhaps to be a real person in their eyes. So, yeah.
I will also mention one of the #1 fandom conversations that comes up in relation to this section is how is he having all the sex and nobody noticed the fat suit? Which the answer is probably something like you don't always have to take off your clothes, especially back then when they had very complicated outfits.
Yeah, but still.
Artistic license.
Yeah. That seems a little sketchy. But
hey, it's been about 4 months. Maybe he's actually put on a lot of weight.
Maybe.
Probably not, though.
So then we keep getting this sense over these next few chapters of Robin and what he thinks about Taddy Boy and Lymond's idea, Lymond's thoughts about Robin as well. So like it says, since Taddy Boy's first carefree days in France, Lymond had kept his finger lightly on the pulse of Robin Stewart's troubles for little reason other than habit. So we get this sense that like Lymond isn't invested in Robin the way that Robin is invested in him. So he's kind of just like lightly mentoring him just because that's what he does, as opposed to being genuinely engaged in the future of this young man.
Yeah. I like the bit right after that. It says it was also the sign of a born teacher. All this was not an aspect of Taddy Boy that leaped to the eye. I like that because that's the narrator actually jumping in and telling us something for sure, which she doesn't usually do.
Yeah. So, and we get to see more explicitly that Robin is, it says, a grudging admiration had succeeded distrust. Even before the hunt, he had started to seek out Taddy. After it, aggressively, he showed signs of haunting him. And Taddy Boy, who by this time had his own reasons, did nothing to stop him. So that's kind of interesting. So what reasons does Lymond have to either not discourage or encourage Robin hanging around him, paying attention to him? Like, there's some value to Lymond to having Robin Stewart around a lot. So
what do you think that is?
Well, it gives some insight into the archers. I mean, having one around.
I also think at this point that Lymond probably sees that there's some sort of connection between Robin Stewart and Daubeny. And if Daubeny really is our sort of secret villain and Lymond's caught on to that, he might be sort of levying Robin Stewart for information or keeping an eye on him specifically because of that.
It's not a secret that they're connected, right? I mean, they were connected at the beginning.
No, not really. But we don't know how much sort of power Daubeny has over Robin Stewart. Because Daubeny isn't still the head of the Royal Archers, is he? He was at one time.
Right. He's retired or something.
No, but he is like the one responsible for sending Robin to like escort the Irish to France.
Yeah, he still has enough power that he can sort of direct their movements in certain ways, right? Okay. So then this just sort of starts Robin is like, why are you still with Liamro? Like he keeps bugging Daddy Boy, like, just give up on this guy. Why are you with him? And there's lots of that. And so here's this interesting bit that I referenced earlier where Lymond basically he doesn't accuse Robin, but he says like, which of Liam's faking successes is irritating you? Being turned off the tennis court or your cheetah clawing his wolfhound to death? That hurt, by the way. And Robin says, I'm pleased to hear it, said Stewart viciously. So you still get this sense that Robin is still super immature. Like he's not dealing with stuff very well, nor is he growing a whole bunch at this point.
No. And right after that, he says he's mediocre and he doesn't care. And he's like so upset about this, but it's like, Robin, you're pretty mediocre and you don't care either. So like pot kettle.
And he's still got this holdup that it seems like Liamro isn't interested in women at all. Like that's the one thing he's kept mentioning over and over and over.
Well, Lymon's the one who said that. So like, I'm not sure. He says he doesn't even bother with what? Women? That remains to be seen. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's what he meant. Maybe it wasn't.
I think that's what he meant because he's brought it up in the past.
Yeah. What do you think's going on with that? Because I think he's repressing that he's gay.
Robin.
Yeah.
I've caught little hints of it. I definitely think he has an admiration for Lymond, very much like Will Scott had an admiration for Lymond in the last book. I've definitely caught on to that throughout these chapters.
Yeah, and
I don't know.
It might be that he feels like he has to be aggressive or be aggressive about women or hide the fact that he's not interested, whereas Liam is just kind of like, well, I'm not interested. But there's also this next bit that I think is where Taddy Boy says, and is he mediocre? He upsets your philosophy by being happy, but I find him irritating for other reasons entirely. So he basically tells Robin that Liamro is happy, and that's what bugs Robin. Like, because Robin doesn't understand, like, this is my take on it. I think that Robin doesn't understand why Liamro is happy. And he thinks that certain things will make him happy. Like, Robin thinks certain things will make him happy. And if he gets those things, he'll be happy. And Liamro doesn't have those things, but he's still happy. And so Robin is super irritated by that. And Lymond just sees it. You know, he knows. And Robin just has the wrong priorities. He's got bad goals and bad priorities. And
well, I agree with that. And I think Robin spends so much time being jealous and resentful of other people's happiness that, like, if he would just redirect that energy toward his own happiness, he probably would be happy by now.
Or start focusing on happiness. Like
yeah, just live your life.
Yeah, just live your life. And like, having happiness as a goal is a bad goal, because it's like you can be content with things and enjoy things, but trying to force yourself to be happy is just going to defeat, you're never going to be happy. Like,
well, yeah, and just in general, you can't spend your life looking at everybody else and always comparing yourself to other people. You will never ever be happy, because there's always going to be someone one step above you and one step above that and one step above that. So no matter how high you elevate, like, unless you're the king, but even then you're probably looking at the next monarch going like, he's got better stuff than me.
The king isn't happy. Like the odds of the king being happy are pretty slim. And so it's like you look at all this stuff and you think it's going to make you happy, and those people are not happy. Like the odds of everybody faking it is pretty high. So just think about what you enjoy, do those things, don't worry about other people. Like, yeah, it's.
So then what do you think it is about Liamro that Lymond finds irritating?
That he's not living up to his responsibilities as a leader, I think. I mean,
yeah. And Lymond I think would love to have his position of power because Lymond cares so much about the political situation and he has a bias to act and make a difference. And here's someone in the position to be able to do that who doesn't use it.
So then they go to visit Theobny.
Oh,
Wait, before that.
Yeah, I
oh,
just
you go
want
ahead.
to bring up one thing too. Laura, why don't you go first?
Well, the thing I was going to ask you guys about was Robin kind of confesses to him that he would have left if it wasn't for him, which is a big kind of emotional revelation to give to this person. And then you have Lymond's reaction: neither surprise nor pleasure showed on the dark face opposite, only hard-held patience and something else so efficiently suppressed that Stewart missed it altogether. What was the something else?
That's pretty much exactly what I was going to ask. So
Yeah, I think it was a memory, but I think this is one of those things where, I mean, which particular memory of somebody changing their life for Lymond is it? Like, I think Robin says he's stuck around for Lymond. So Lymond could be reminded of several different people in his life that have stuck around for him or stayed for him or changed their plans for him, and it's turned into disaster. So
what do you think Lymond's emotional reaction is to this revelation that this person is staying for him and has this intense attachment to him?
I think there's a bit of worry just because all of the people in the past that have done the same for him and how they've ended up. I mean, Christian Stewart, Turkey Matt, like, I think he wants to reach out and like throw Robin a line and be like, you know, I could be your mentor, we could do this, but at the same point, he's holding back because he doesn't want to hurt anymore. He doesn't want anybody else to get hurt because of his actions.
I'm not convinced that, well, it's a combination of things because, first of all, I'm not convinced that he feels all that strongly about Robin. Like, maybe this thing that he said reminded Lymond of something and he had a somewhat intense emotional reaction to that, which he suppresses. But I'm not sure it has anything directly to do with Robin because pretty soon after this, he totally puts both his own life and Robin's life like at huge risk. And granted, he's probably drunk at the time and whatever. And I think Philippe is right. Like, it's just a sign that he's starting to spiral into something. But he doesn't seem to be all that protective of Robin at this point. Like, I don't know.
Let me throw something out there. We were talking a little bit about Robin's character flaws, this focus on other people and stuff. Robin's not that smart. He's not that capable. He's not attractive. He's so jealous and petty. He almost got, he did get Louis killed, you know? Could Lymond's reaction, because it kind of emphasizes that he's not showing surprise or pleasure, could his reaction actually be something like disgust or contempt, that this person is so attached to him that he actually doesn't like?
Yeah. I mean, what he suppresses doesn't have to be positive. Sure. But I think it's conjecture. Like, I don't think we have textual support either way. Like, I think Dunnett is being intentionally vague here.
True, yes.
Which is okay.
Dunnett, vague, never.
What?
But she's never like exactly vague, because by the end you'll usually like be able to read it again and be like, oh, that's what that meant.
Yes. And then they begin blandly with a visit to
Albany.
Yep. I love that the visit begins blandly.
You know it's not going to stay bland. Not with that company.
That seems to be a little bit of some foreshadowing. And the Douglases are there. So we have George and James.
It's George we care about.
Right. I kind of forget James is around. We get a delightful little insight into Liam apparent obsession with art, which I was not expecting this. Like, I mean, we know that he has all this esoteric knowledge that he really delights in and all that, but I was not expecting him to be like completely enthralled by all the art.
So. But see, it shows he plays this like hick, but he's not at all. He's super educated, actually.
Yeah. So, I mean, she just uses words like savoring the art, you know. It's a lovely thing. And yeah, so then we see we get this little picture of D'Aubigny, just a little bit, where it's like he was a soldier, he'd been in prison, and it says if for political reasons only. I'm not sure if that's supposed to like soften the idea that he'd been in prison. So I guess he wasn't arrested for a crime, is what that's trying to say. But it's hard to imagine that because he's also super into the art, apparently.
But I think it's interesting that his tastes were easy and his appreciation oddly slack. Like, even though he's Mr., big shot in France, and Liam Rose is this, hick from Ireland, Liam Rose's tastes are probably better than his.
Oh, yeah. It says, because it says his big firm hands turning over a piece of enamel, like it's hard to imagine him as a soldier or in prison or whatever. But it says judged by the unfairest standards set against a scourging aestheticism bloodily acquired, which I thought that was intriguing. Like, why is his sense of the aesthetic acquired as a soldier? Like, is what she trying to say, that he's uneducated about art and just collects it? Is it contrasted to Liam Rose's clear education? I don't know. It seems odd.
Maybe I don't know.
Like,
maybe he worked very hard to acquire his aesthetic education because he thought it was important, but he's actually just doesn't have very good taste.
Yeah, his tastes are easy and his appreciation oddly slack. So he collects. He's like the collector who doesn't really understand what he's collecting.
Yeah, and he gives his whole speech after, which, like, I don't know what all the places are, but it's, such a, like, up on his high horse, blah, 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 like, I'm so, aesthetically, brilliant, and it's just full of bullshit.
Well, it also felt like, I thought that whole speech sounded like he was complaining about how much stuff cost. It was like he has certain other continuing drains on his income. It isn't easy for him to be as generous as he would like, except in some quarters. Like, so it's like he'll spend this money on this and that money on that, but he's like annoyed that it's not, maybe it's like annoyed it's not him anymore.
Oh yeah, and he's like ripping on his competitors. Have you seen Echoin and Chantilly? It's a pity when the taste isn't there, which is, I think these are both chateaus of Anne de Montmorency. Uh-huh. So he's like, his taste is bad. What a pity.
Yeah. So, and like this whole, of course, Florence was at its height very recently, implying that it's no longer at its height.
Oh, he's like acting like he's better than all these other things, and it's like, dude, who do you think you are?
Yeah. I love the bit about it ends with, and we know what that means, and I'm like, we don't.
Lost you about 5 paragraphs, Mr.
Yeah, like, nope, don't know what that means. Anyway, okay, so then we get this scene where I was kind of like, oh, George knows.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because he does this incredibly deliberate, like, drawing attention to Taddy Boy's hands. And of course we know that Lymond's hands are scarred. and then he does. And so like I love that removing his cloak and smoothing his doublet, and now Francis Crawford of Lymond, let us talk. That was a nice little moment.
Just going back to the moment where he like holds down his hand and says, don't you sometimes regret that something like that can't be bought? Or can it, I wonder? And he's like basically saying his hand is beautiful, like one of these works of art. And then he's talking about buying it, meaning like, I know that the Queen Dowager is buying you. But there's also this, like, he tried to buy him in the last book. Remember, he wanted to buy Lymond's services or whatever for him. So he's still also got this like kind of possessive quality of like, oh, I would love to have this guy working for me. I wish I could buy him. It's so creepy and predatory.
It's also a dig, because Lymond literally was bought. Like, he was a slave, and his hand literally was bought and sold. So it's, and it's not like George Douglas doesn't know that, so
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, not a nice guy.
No. Well, and this is one of the I think themes that runs through this book, is this idea of Lymond being bought, and Lymond selling himself for information, selling himself to the Queen Dowager, and this whole idea that he doesn't want to be bought and he's trying to not, but then he kind of sells himself in another way anyway. So
yeah. And like, how is he, there's an interesting parallel with him, he's selling his body as a musician, being used as a plaything for entertainment, and probably in sex as well, trying to get information out of people. Is that a exchange of, goods and services? And
well, the whole debate about whether Lymond is bisexual is kind of contingent on whether he enjoyed any of that sex at all, or whether it was all just for information.
Oh, that's a good point.
Which is a good question. I don't have the answer. And I think she leaves it ambiguous.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, if we're going to ask that question, then I think it's just as legitimate a question to ask, is he like asexual? Like, just because, like, if you're going to ask, did he enjoy the sex with men? I think you should equally ask, did he enjoy the sex with women? So like,
yeah,
I don't think that's necessarily a fair question.
Well, yeah, at this point, but you do know that, I don't know how much you know about Margaret Lennox, but there was some emotion involved there, if nothing else.
Yeah, but we don't know anything. Like, we don't have any details about, like, we don't even know if, I guess we assume they were physically involved because of the scandal aspect to it. But
oh, they definitely were physically involved. He makes that really clear.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just not totally
one of the reasons that Matthew Lennox hates him so much, because he was cuckolded.
Oh, Matthew. Yeah. Okay, so then we get this whole Douglas gets really explicit about the Queen's plan, like what the whole governor, get rid of the governor, have the Queen take over as the governor of Scotland. And he's kind of digging at Lymond throughout the whole thing, like, isn't he trusted? They have this little exchange about the mask and like wearing a mask and being two-faced and all of that. So we get a little hint about the Diane and Jenny. So he says at the bottom of 161, no, Diana is rumored is becoming a little jealous of the de Guises, and did she know what, for example, some ladies of my acquaintance suspect, she would be very angry indeed. I think that's a reference to Jenny. I don't know, any thoughts in that section?
My thoughts are mainly around the imagery of the mask, because we have Tatty Boy losing, like Lymond losing himself in this mask of Tatty Boy, and then we have the mask is of Quetzalcoatl, and then we have actually a reference later to I don't know how to say this, but Janus-like, which is
a two-faced,
the two-faced god, which is kind of this like two faces of Lymond.
I know that is Buffy.
Oh yeah, Ethan Rayne.
It's all episode. Yeah, that
yeah. So then I was doing a little research because the other god that is kind of ubiquitous through this section or through this book is Dionysus. Lymond is this Dionysus figure. And I was looking up, is Dionysus and Quetzalcoatl related? And I did find a website that's like, Dionysus and Quetzalcoatl are related.
Isn't Quetzalcoatl the Aztec god of wisdom?
So I did some research that I can share here.
Because I always thought he was wisdom, which is telling.
So we have, actually, here we go. So Quetzalcoatl, wisdom, but also
god of wind and wisdom, it says under the picture.
Yes, there's something about he's a boundary maker and transgressor between earth and sky, creator deity, which I think has some resonances. Certainly the boundary breaker. And then of course we have Dionysus, who's always associated with wine and vine leaves. And if you look at like the number of references of Lymond with wine in these chapters, it's like everywhere. And then I don't know what this website is, but it was like Dionysus is often compared to the South American god Quetzalcoatl, and his music is very much alive with Brazilian rhythm drumming performed in the south of France. You learn something new every day. And then I found them both also on this wiki page of life, death, rebirth gods. So I think Dunnett was probably going for some kind of parallel between the two of them with this motif. And I think maybe she came up with Quetzalcoatl because actually in the King's Entry of Rouen, she didn't describe it in the book, but there was actually in the historical reality, there was this whole thing where they took these poor kidnapped Brazilian natives and made them like perform a dance in this like fake Brazil that they made there. Yeah, so I think maybe she, inspired by that, like then picked up Quetzalcoatl and then brought that into the story as this parallel with Dionysus and this mask that Lymond wears. But it's an amazing image for his Tatty Boy guys. This is kind of scary and godlike and boundary breaking. And this whole, I mean, this description of Dionysus is like, so Tatty Boy, the god of wine, pleasure, festivity, madness, and wild frenzy. Sounds like Tatty Boy.
Sounds good.
There's a poem by Paul Dunbar, who's a late 19th century American poet, and it's called "We Wear the Mask." And there's a line in it that says, "We wear the mask that grins and lies," and that line just sort of ran through my head as I was reading through this.
Okay. Other bits I just picked out in the section was detaching himself in all his bleary satin from the door, Tatty Boy, blah, blah. I love the bleary satin as an image for him.
Oh, it's probably tattered and dirty.
But then also his kind of bitterness, because they're talking about the Queen Dowager, and George is like referring to this meeting she's had about becoming the governor of Scotland, and Lymond says, if his stock, meaning himself, were as high as you think, he would have been at this meeting you speak of, surely. So there's definitely a little bit of, I'm like doing all this debauchery stuff because like I'm not invited to the political discussions.
And he's in charge of the little queen's security, and he's still not at the, like,
yeah.
They're just using him.
And maybe we'll get to it later, but I did just, I don't know, Philippe, if you wanted to add anything, but I was curious at what point you started to, because you mentioned earlier you felt like Lymond was losing himself in Tatty Boy. Like, where were you starting to see that?
I mean, there's been bits and pieces, the drinking, the excessive drinking that's been happening, but really, mostly it occurs during the steeplechase scene. So it hasn't really happened yet. I'm still curious as to when George Douglas caught on to the fact that this was Lymond. I still think it happened at the printing press. I think he was distracted in that moment, but he was there that whole night. He had plenty of time to see that, you know, here's this guy that looks just like Lymond with a fat suit and black hair. So, because George definitely spent enough time with him in the last book to know what he looks like. So, I think it's just taken them this long to figure out some sort of way to manipulate Lymond to his uses. And here we have him trying to blackmail him. Like, do this stuff for me, or I will tell the king that you're the Queen Dowager's spy. So.
But before we get to the blackmail, we get some interesting insight into D'Aubigny, which I think is we haven't had before, which is that the queen and the constable hate him. And the queen and the constable are like actively seeking to prevent him from rising any further than he already is. They can't get rid of him because of the king's sort of former affection for him, but they can certainly like distract the king from thinking about him. They can sort of thwart his plans. So he's basically stagnating in terms of his power at the court, it seems, which is interesting. So then we get this bit where on 162 it says the love perhaps weakened. So the constable was made to release D'Aubigny from prison because the king loved D'Aubigny. The love is perhaps weakened, but the regard is still there. Neither Catherine nor the constable can injure D'Aubigny, but they will see he is kept out of the royal mind. So the king has other favorites beside the de Guise family. You know them well. Saint Andre, Condé, and whatever his name is. The absent Vidame, the one, he's in London, right?
Yeah.
Each in turn hates his or her rival. Nearly all, without exception, hate the de Guises, so that if someone is trying to kill the little queen's mother is in quite a predicament, etc., etc. And he suggests that the assassin might be Queen Catherine, which I don't think that's true, but yeah. So it just shows us that D'Aubigny, it's possible that he's very frustrated with his situation, which might be motive if he's our bad guy. Like that might be motive to change things or to, I don't know. Anyway, then we get blackmail, where George is blackmailing him. Also, what's a
Doonenny?
Thank you.
I'm wondering the same thing.
What is that? They mentioned it twice.
Well, do is two, right?
Yeah, I think so. I guess it's done.
That's the way it's spelled. It could be something else. I don't know French. I'm horrible.
Two something? I don't know. Laura's gonna look it up.
I'll see if it's in. Oh, here we go.
Like how last chapter it would have been great to know what a leveret was before, you know.
Yeah, rabbit.
Oh boy. It's a poem in French. What? I don't know what this means. Okay, there's a poem in French, and then after it, it says, here we go. A sweet refusal with a loving smile. Would a match a yes were you of such a mind, of cozening in truth I do not weary, but joy tastes best when seemingly denied. So it means, I guess it means a sweet refusal with a loving smile.
Oh, so he's just saying no.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, yeah.
He's saying no sarcastically and
in a sweet, sarcastic way, yes.
Like, sorry, dear.
Yeah. Which is kind of funny. Like, he really just doesn't care. He's like, yeah, you can try to blackmail me, you can try to reveal me and get me killed, but I don't care. I'm not going to do what you want.
So he basically, Lymond just totally calls his bluff, and George knows it. Like, there's no mystery about that at all. It says Sir George knew that Lymond had quite cheerfully called his bluff. The problem, though, is that George is now, like, I can see George being a problem later. Like, he's not, Lymond didn't do what he wants. And so, in addition to this next scene where he's like super baiting him, who knows what's going to happen down the road, where George is not going to be predisposed to help Lymond and is perhaps going to be throwing obstacles in his way. Anything short of like outright betrayal. He's not going to outright betray him, I don't think. At least that seems to be implied, but
he could.
Yeah, he could.
Well, and he's already starting to show what he could do by initiating the conversation about Lymond himself to Daubeny. So,
right, I think he's just baiting Lymond.
Oh, exactly.
He's just trying to get his goat. But
I love how like Liam is the one who sort of like takes not the bait, but like takes over and like just doesn't show any sign of like, oh, we shouldn't talk about him. That would be weird. He goes full force into it and starts.
No, he's George Douglas's ally.
Yeah.
Like, tell me more.
But why? Why is Liam doing that?
Because I think he's trying to throw them off the scent that Lymond is literally in the room with him as we speak.
Maybe he's just super curious because Lymond hasn't told him anything about himself, and Liam been hanging out with this guy for a while, and he's just like, who is this guy?
I think he also thinks it's funny, and maybe he's a little bit like kind of wants to mess with Lymond because Lymond just keeps coming home drunk and throwing up, and he's a little bit annoyed at him.
And like sexiling him from the room.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
that's
it's also possible that Liam is not really aware of the consequences. Like, he doesn't seem to be super politically aware, and so it's also possible that he's just playing he's just playing with it and having fun with it, but not realizing that, like, oh wait, this could actually be dangerous.
Yeah. That's definitely Liam. He's so chill, he doesn't realize like the world is serious business sometimes.
Yeah. There's a slight mention of Tosh coming, the Oshkart guy. So Thomas Oshkart, whose other name was Tosh, who we know was connected to the menagerie. So interesting that he's mentioned. I have no theories, but just throwing it out there.
Actually, before you move on from this section, I also want to highlight Daubeny's comment. He says, the fellow's yellow-headed, surely, the same as my brother. That's why when my dear Matthew found it infuriating when Margaret, he broke off. Margaret, he had perhaps remembered, was George Douglas's niece. So I think he's saying that's why my brother found it so annoying because his wife slept with a blonde guy.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
And I also wonder if it's a sign that, like, this bit was interesting. Like, if Daubeny, because we've had this theory that maybe Liam is being targeted because people think he's Lymond. So if Daubeny is our bad guy, if the main characteristic he thinks of Lymond physically is that he's blonde, maybe he's the guy going after Liam. But then George Douglas, dick that he is, says, hey, he could dye his hair.
Well,
So if Daubeny hadn't thought of that before.
Oh my god. And George also makes that reference earlier to the book called like The Art of Knowing How to Die, which is like DYE, which just cracks me up because George's way of trolling him is like, it's malicious, but it's also funny.
Right. And I love that Liam is kind of like, I totally thought that book was about tinting and not death. Like, he's not.
Yep. I also, just before we move on from the section, we have the rest of the day. Tatty Boy beat Liam unmercifully at backgammon, so he just like gets his revenge that way.
Damn you. Yeah. So then we get this bit where Robin is coming up to Taddy and he's like, hey, your guy is super interested in this Lymond fellow. He's just like, maybe you shouldn't be with him because he's super interested in this other guy. That's how I took that scene. Anyway, Lymond kind of blows him off, but
I think there's a really interesting throwaway line at the top of page 166. They had all caught the edge of a flaming row conducted behind closed doors between Lord D'Aubigny and the archer. So clearly he's yelling at Robin Stewart for something.
Yeah, they're having a row. So they've had some sort of big fight.
What could have set that off?
Who knows?
But
it is an interesting sign that D'Aubigny might not have the amount of power over Robin that we think, or he doesn't have as much power over Robin as he could, because otherwise Robin wouldn't be yelling back. So the fact that they're having a row means they're having a mutual shouting contest, and Robin wouldn't be able to shout at someone who had a lot of power over him. So that seems to imply that he's not as much in D'Aubigny's like pocket as maybe he could have been. I don't know. So who knows? Okay, then they go to Madame Boyle's.
Madame Boyle.
But Una was not there. So also arguing. There's an argument that lasts all night. So they were welcomed with bursting of kisses, and passed a night there that never hinted at a pillow through midnight to dawn, so fierce were the arguments. So
I think that's just passionate conversation.
they're just like, yeah, I mean, but they're probably debating all through the night.
Yeah. Taddy Boy's shown O'Liamro spoke fitfully. What's up with O'Liamro? Because he's normally babbling on.
Yeah, but Una was not there.
Is he just sad because Una's not there?
Yeah.
He may be annoyed at Taddy Boy.
And the next morning, dressing, Taddy Boy was unduly entertaining on the subject of O'Liamro's reticence. So he's giving him a super hard time the next day about the whole thing. And O'Liamro, you can see this, like, they're getting super irritated with each other. So O'Liamro is like, mind your own beeswax.
Yeah, look after your own affairs before you butt into mine.
Right. Like, what are you getting into my business for? And then shocked, Taddy Boy looks around. So it's like he's surprised that O'Liamro's irritated with him, even though he's been totally like picking at him for a while. So yeah, it's kind of funny. It's almost like he's surprised, like, wait, I pissed somebody off. Yeah. And anyway, so it says, but they end with, to take heed to the luck of another, Prince of Barrow, tis a true friend you are. And then O'Liamro says, super sarcastically, I'm happy you think so. So he says dryly.
I like the way she kind of builds up their irritation with each other, because it, kind of grows through the chapters then.
And I don't think they're necessarily mad. Like, I don't think that they've had a falling out necessarily. They're just like picking at each other, and getting irritated. And I mean, they have been stuck together for a while, and they're in this subterfuge, which is tension and stress. And they're both under tension and stress. Lymond a lot more than O'Liamro. But
also keep in mind that O'Liamro is basically stuck in his room. Like, because of what happened on the tennis court, he's been allowed to travel with them, but he's not to be in presence of the king. So that really limits the amount of things that he can do during the day.
Yeah, I think he goes out and hangs with the Irish, and I mean, I'm sure he has people to hang out with, but honestly, like, I see it as they're roommates, they're sharing a bed. One of them is getting wasted all the time, coming in late all the time,
locking the other one
out. Like, you're gonna start to drive each other nuts in that situation.
It's like the college roommate that drives you crazy, and it's not that you hate them, they just drive you crazy.
You might need some space. Yeah. All right.
Okay, so then we get to chapter 4 in Blois. Is that how you say it?
I guess.
Blois.
Boy.
Blois.
Blois. which is apparently full of women.
Yes.
So, yeah. They're using Lymond. Not sure. Oliamro got Una a new dog. Not as good as Loudest. Then the queen invites. So then Oliamro has conversations with two queens, or the queen and the dowager queen. So that seems to go fairly well. He had this formal and pleasant interview with the dowager queen. So he seems to be repairing his reputation a little bit, which is nice. Yeah. And the dowager kind of apologizes for Lymond, sort of says like, I'm sorry he's proved a little unorthodox. Like she does this usually, she can't think of a word to say. Unorthodox.
I think it's also interesting about that is that she thanks him for preserving Lymond's identities, and he has this kind of uncomfortable reaction of like, oh yeah, I guess I'm complicit in this too. I'm part of this whole spying for the Queen Dowager thing. I don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah. And then he notices something which I feel is some sort of foreshadowing maybe, but I didn't know where it was going. It says he noticed a rag doll left asprawl on a cabinet, its linen split, its hair torn, its head limp. And then he had a physical reaction to that, like his stomach churned to the image. And it's like, oh, that's super ominous. But
well, so think about what happens right before that.
Well, I mean, he talks to
literally the two paragraphs above that. He says, when a man draws the blood out of his heart and the marrow out of his bones to make an art, there's little sense in bemoaning the frayed suit or the poor table or the angular manners. 'Tis the liberty of mind, an annulment of convention, and a fine carefree richness of excess itself sets the soul whirling and soaring. And then Lady Fleming says, you've certainly hit on Tatty Boy's receipt. I should think his soul is whirling and soaring like a Garonne windmill. His habits are low enough. So we're talking about art and creation and how it is okay to live the most debauched lifestyle and to damage yourself or to damage others in pursuit of art. And there's kind of a question of, well, really though? Like, is it really okay to do anything in pursuit of art and destroy yourself? And then we have this like limp rag doll all torn apart and limp and its hair torn and whatever. And like, I think that's Tatty Boy.
I mean, also, do we trust Lady Fleming's opinions about what is appropriate to do about anything?
I know you don't.
We do.
There's this whole motif of Tatty Boy kind of being all used up, and
yeah. But is it? I mean, I don't know. I feel like, so when a man draws blood out of his heart and marrow out of his bones to make art, but is that what's happening? Like, he's not doing this art.
He's working very hard, and his music is moving the court.
But he's not working very hard to create art. He's working very hard to distract the French court and keep them entertained and, you know, desperately trying to keep all these balls in the air that he's juggling.
All of that is true, but he is also working very hard to create art because art is his way in, and he's really good at it.
I don't know. Maybe I have a different definition of art. I don't think he's creating something out of his soul, or like because he thinks it's beautiful, or he's creating exactly what he thinks will entertain the.
But remember how his music like made people cry and made people stand up and come and beg for more. This is what allowed him to stay. There has to be something in it that it connects with these people enough that like they were like willing to overlook a Liam Rose terrible, faux pas. So I think that there is some combination of something that he's putting into it that's making this impression.
Yeah. I think he's just using what he knows to manipulate them. And he knows that like a sad song will make them cry, or a beautiful melody will.
That's definitely why he's doing it, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that the melody isn't beautiful and the song isn't sad and that his performance isn't moving.
But is that what's tearing him apart? Like, is it the playing the song that's tearing him apart, or is it the manipulating all the people and the doing the thing that's tearing him apart? Like,
oh yeah, but I think maybe the suggestion is, it's like the whole thing of like, the rock star should be able to live the debauched lifestyle and have the tragic end, and that's okay, but do all the drugs, right? There's like a really common motif. I should be able to do all the drugs so that I can make this music and destroy myself in the process.
Right.
So I don't think what's tearing him apart is the creation of music. I think it's a justification for him to tear himself apart in a way.
Yeah. That makes sense. So the menagerie comes back, or at least Archibald, Abernathy. Archie comes back. Let's just call him Archie. And apparently sharing his house with bears, which I thought was intriguing. So Archie comes back. He has a town lodging he shares with his assistants, several bears, and Tosh, the Saltenbach Tosh. I don't know what that word means. Her vocabulary is spectacular.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So I love that the donkey foreseeing hard days ahead. It's like, really? Is that what the donkey did? Foresaw some hard days. So let's see.
I also like in this section, the brothers of Bourbon and the other young gentlemen, released like puppies from the whalebone of Chambord, raced upstairs to Tatty Boy. He's always garlanded in young men, and they're all running to him.
Like, what should we do now? And so then he's concocted this plan, and Diabni is suspicious that something's going on. Yeah. So they're going to they're gonna do this race, which they don't quite explain what it is, but Tatty Boy's gonna deliver a serenade. And then we get moved to the house where Una is staying with her cousins. And Aliamro is visiting them or staying with them, and they have this lovely evening, blah blah blah. But eventually the dancing is over, the wine's been drunk, the guests have departed, and the cousins are asleep, and so it's just Aliamro and Una left talking. So they have this exchange where she's really trying to get him to acknowledge like his responsibility politically, and he's just not having it. He's like, no, I don't want to. And she's really pushing him pretty hard. And she's kind of like, you're happy with this, and you're happy, like, how can you see these things happening to Ireland and not be incensed? And he's just kind of like, yeah, no. So she obviously cares deeply about the political state of Ireland, and he just really doesn't.
Well, and I don't know what you guys think, but I think that the way she cares is extremely genuine. She's not faking it. Like,
yeah.
And to me, there's like a parallel with Lymond in a way. Like, he cares passionately for Scotland. She cares passionately for Ireland.
I literally wrote, is Una like Lymond?
Oh, I think I wrote the same thing. Yeah, because there's another part where she makes a reference to what happens to Lewis is what happens to my friends.
That's exactly where I wrote it. It was like, yeah, this basically this like, you can't be friends with me because the people that I care about like come to disaster. And just like
there's also on 171, Una was handsomely gowned, but she wore it all like sea riches, prodigally and carelessly, leaving the rack to bring her fresh gifts tomorrow. She keeps getting compared to a sea creature, and I remind you that Lymond also gets compared to a sea creature a lot.
Yeah.
Especially in his opening scene in Game of Kings.
Yeah. Liam is not oblivious to what she's doing also, I think is we're saying. Like, he knows he's not saying this thoughtlessly. Like, there's a point in the conversation even where he says, there's no chance of inciting me, my dear. As the Pope said of Hippolito, he's crazy, the devil, he's crazy, he doesn't want to be a priest. And so he's basically saying, you're not going to convince me to get all up in arms about this. You're just not. And yeah.
Which is funny because he's so into her, but he won't make any concessions to what she cares about most in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but he wants to be her friend. And she says, it's not a good idea. It's just bad things happen to my friends. And then he says, and do you like me or do you love me at all? And then Lymond interrupts.
How dare he?
I mean, Lymond didn't pick that exact moment because he wasn't in the room, but it still was that exact moment. So
yeah, the skull splitting crash. And then the people in the room like wake up. He's like, oh, what is it? And
I love the way she describes the loss of that moment. The moment, the mood, the answer, all gone. It's so wistful, this moment that can never be gotten back.
Yeah, the mood was gone. Everything.
Also, just to jump, like before we jump into this part, the things from that section are quite revealing. She also says, I have had dogs enough, O Liam, and lovers enough, which is quite a thing to admit for a woman who's supposed to be like trying to get married. So you would assume she's a virgin.
Yeah.
In this culture, but nope, she's not even pretending.
No. She clearly is. I mean, she's being quite bold with her, what is her focus and what is her plan, which presumably the whole send Liam to the king at the tennis court thing was part of. I mean, she's so laser focused on politically like improving Ireland. It must have had something to do with that. I still don't think it's justified as of yet. We'll see. But
one other note before we move on is that he calls her Mocreve. I'm probably saying that wrong. It's Gaelic, and it means my heart. And this is just the first time this shows in the series, and it's an important thing to remember. My heart in Irish.
Mocreve.
Lovely.
At the top of 172. What is Rigdomna?
No idea.
Okay.
One thing I thought was interesting is that she's super mad about this and about the Tatty Boy, like this whole drum serenade thing. And her cousin, I think, is the person she's staying with, stops her and says, no, child, if it's not meant as a compliment, it's meant as a test. Either way, it calls for good nature, stay and smile. And like, that's such a, I feel like that's such a message that women get, like that it's like, no, don't be angry, like shut up, smile, go with this in this way instead of being passionate and angry. And either it could be a compliment, it could be a test, it doesn't matter. Be diplomatic.
I think it's really telling that she's super pissed and she's very cutting and she's very angry and she's actually mean to Liam Rowe. And it tells us a lot about her, that she is like such a passionate person. She has such an intense emotional reaction and such outrage. She has a huge amount of pride. But even Liam Rowe here is very, very angry. And this is like the first time we've ever seen him really angry.
Which, you know, reasonable.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
His
So
rare slothful anger.
he is. I love. So there's a point at the top of 75 where Una's like, "Do you think he's pleased?" I mean, she's saying that sarcastically. And Taddy Boy's actor face was crestfallen. So not his real face, his actor face. Is he not? He is not. Suddenly was Kurt Boyce at his elbow. Like, he is not. Yeah. So in other words, and we don't need to talk about this here. We're going to talk about it at the chateau because he's mad.
I think it's also very interesting that we see Taddy Boy through Aliamro's eyes and Una's eyes on this like section 174, 75, where they really are both pissed at him and don't like him. You see him as a jerk. He's irresponsible. He's a sloppy mess. And then in the next section, you see him through Robin Stewart's eyes, and he's this alluring, charismatic, seductive, inspiring figure. And it's such a contrast just by the use of point of view of who's looking at him.
Yeah. So in this next section, he basically gets Robin to come run this race with him. And that Robin has a really insightful comment that gets a little lost in the middle of this, but he says, it takes a lot more courage not to do a crazy thing than it does to fall in with the, and then Lymond's like, friend Robin, come running with me. It's just like, yeah, it would take a lot of courage not to fall into the temptation of doing the thing. Like, don't do the stupid thing. But
this reminds me exactly of when they say, resist peer pressure, don't do drugs. It takes more courage to say no. And it's literally like, that's exactly what's happening here. And Lymond is not having it. He's like, I turn on all my seductive powers and he will come with me.
It is true. And then we get,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was to say, before the chapter ends, we get this slight just callback to Jenny Fleming, and she is like, why this night is memorable, and one of the reasons is that Jenny Fleming is not alone. So, and yeah, anyway.
Well, just two things before we go to the next chapter is one, Robin Stewart shows up here. What would have happened? Who would Lymond have run with if Robin Stewart hadn't showed up?
Duncan.
Duncan,
for sure.
I mean, we do see that in the next part.
Yeah.
And then also that very last sentence, and memorable at last for Una O'Dwyer, sitting alone and unseeing for half that long night in the Hotel Moutier before a dead fire. We get the reason why it's memorable for everybody else in the next chapter, but it really doesn't mention Una at all. So I'm wondering what happened to her at the hotel by herself.
Yeah, well, and it's the contrast between Lady Fleming. It's memorable for Lady Fleming, who is not alone, and it's memorable for Una, who is alone. And that's an interesting side by side.
How do you think Una was going to answer Aliamro?
I mean, I think she likes him a little bit. I don't know whether she would tell him.
I mean, it's possible that she does like him, but doesn't want to deal with the consequences of that. So that's why she tried to get him removed from the country. That's not a great idea, but.
Did she know him before?
Yeah, she didn't really know him that well before. She didn't know him before. But maybe he's grown on her.
Maybe.
I don't know the answer, but I think that I actually do think he's growing on her.
Yeah, I think he's growing on her a little bit. I think she's mad at him because he won't step up to the plate, as it were.
For sure.
So then we have the steeplechase.
So also in this section, I wanted to highlight this image from the vine-covered walls of the inn. Taddy laughed, swung, and climbed up. And that's where he like reaches down and calls Robin Stewart up with him. So he's on this vine-covered wall, and he's drunk on wine. So it's this like clear Dionysus image with the vines and the instruments, right? Because they just came from playing music for Una. And then the way he calls him friend Robin. So he introduces the idea of, you're my friend, come with me. And this is what Robin wants most in the world, is to have a friend, and specifically to have Taddy Boy as his friend. So he is using against him the thing he wants most. And I guess I just want to suggest that there's an irresponsibility to reaching out to someone who is so needy and like giving them something that you don't really mean. It's like the people that invite him to the parties to laugh at him, you know, but it's like a million times worse than that.
Yeah. I mean, Robin is not an admirable character in a lot of ways. Like, he's immature. He's super immature. I think a lot of his cruelty and irresponsibility come from being immature and just not dealing with life as an adult. But Lymond is well aware of all of that. Like, there's no way that he doesn't read Robin pretty well. So I completely agree with you. Like, he's drunk. He wants Robin to do this really dangerous thing with him. And he just says exactly the perfect thing to make Robin do this thing that goes against his better judgment, because he's sober. So Robin's the only sober one. And he doesn't want to do this thing that's super dangerous for good reason. But yeah, Lymond says the perfect thing and he does it anyway. And
Yep.
And then we have a chapter of boys being
so well, before we jump into it, I have some fan art to share that's relevant for this section. All right. So here's our romantic Taddy Boy. I feel like this is how Robin sees him. There's his glass of wine. And then we have also, I just like this one. Oh, and this is from Stockholm Syndrome. Another one was from Bellarose. And then we have, this person just has a whole bunch of Lymond and Liam. Here they're taking a selfie. I don't know why. Here, looks like Taddy's drunk, and same, which I just love. This is Prince of Pictou. And then here's, this I believe is a couple of sketches of Dongen, these ones in the corner. And then I wanted to share some images of the rooftops of Blois. This was posted by Master of Foolhardy Plans on Tumblr, specifically in relation to this book. So we can see what they were running over. I think this is another one of those things that fans sent Dorothy Dunnett postcards of for the rest of her life. And then I just thought it was funny that today on Facebook, in one of the Dunnett groups, which one is this? I forget. Anyway, someone posted this map, which is like letters of where, like, tracing the entire thing. So if you ever want to go to Blois and retrace the steps, you know, now you know.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
Wow, definitely.
So they end up at the church. They end up at the church, right? Because the bell tower. Like
yeah.
by the chateau.
Yeah, and that the tightrope wire is drawn between the church and the chateau.
Yeah. I sort of feel like one of you two should lead us through this. By the way, is it really a steeplechase? Like, is that where the word comes from? Like, running across rooftops like this? I don't know.
It does seem like it was a thing. Like, I think I read somewhere that in Dunnett's primary source research, this was like a thing that people did, was a rooftop race because the houses were so close to each other.
Right. So I'm wondering if that's where the word comes from. Like, because a steeplechase isn't, okay, I'm going to again, I do not live in the world of rich people, so I don't know the rich people things. But isn't a steeplechase like a horse race where the horse has to jump over a lot of obstacles? So
I don't know about the obstacles, but I do know it's related to horse racing.
I think the horse has
It's
to
an
like
obstacle course related to horse racing.
yeah, where a horse has to like jump over water hazards and like fences, and they're not called fences, but things. And but that's what a steeplechase is. So I wonder if the word in English comes from this. I don't know. Anyway.
Do you want one of us to lead through this discussion?
This chapter is they just go do a lot of risky things and run over some houses and almost fall, and Saint Andre rope, and they don't have it. They get
one of us will lead it. Philippe, do you want to, or should I?
Well, I don't have notes drawn up. I mean, it's a lot of action, which we don't necessarily need to go over step by step, but there are a couple of beats that I think are important. Dongen's reaction towards Robin Stewart when Lymond says he's going to run with him. Yeah. I think that's an important one.
Lymond saves Robin right at the beginning. Like, Dongen basically pushes him off the roof, and Lymond saves him pretty dramatically.
So I think, I think what interests me the most in this is the way that we've seen Robin as this bitter person who spends his whole life, looking at others. And this is probably the best night of his life because he spends it, he's not thinking about someone else as something I don't have. He's actually living in the moment for the first time, and he's rising to the occasion. He is this awkward person. He's not that talented. He's pretty mediocre, but Chatty Boy keeps inspiring him, and he keeps being able to step up and find these reserves in himself that he doesn't normally have. To the extent that not only is he able to keep up with Chatty Boy and win the race, but at the end, Lymond almost dies for real, and Robin Stewart saves him. So this inspiration, this quality of charisma that Lymond has to inspire others, has actually inspired Robin to be this much better version of himself, much more capable, and much more emotionally better, because he actually lets go of his bitterness for a second.
Bookended by that. So like this whole scene is bookended by by Lymond saving Robin at the beginning and Robin saving Lymond at the end. And in the middle, there's like this adrenaline, run up the roof, down the roof, through the window, run through the girls at the convent, go through the old lady that screams, it's just like it's like a car chase in a movie, and it's like they scream around the corner and they do that's the feeling that you get here. So it's the, these guys have a rope, but we're gonna cut the rope and steal the rope, and then we're gonna have our own rope, and then
I love that stuff. I'm an action movie person.
Yeah, me too.
I do enjoy this movie, but
so I think, were you gonna say something, Philippe?
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think what's interesting is that how do I say, Lymond is afraid of it. In my interpretation, Lymond is afraid of his power to inspire people, because he inspired Turkey and Christian, and then they died for him. Right. And so this is a thing that he basically has been in a holding pattern, because he is worried about this. He has a whole talk with Margaret Erskine about it. And he almost pulls out because he doesn't want to risk other people dying. But then he full on uses that power, and we see that it is really an amazing power. Like it works. But then it also has this kind of dark side of, was he using it on Robin because he doesn't really care about Robin? I don't know. I think it's really interesting. If nothing else, it's an illustration that Lymond isn't making it up. This is a real power that he has. And then I think this whole idea of Robin Stewart is, he's always the kid that gets chosen last when you're going to choose your dodgeball team or whatever. But here, the most popular person in the court chooses him, and tells him, you're worth a bunch of Dongens, and calls him his friend and calls him his partner, and says, I specifically choose you. So again, it's like everything he ever dreamed of in a very specific way.
Yeah.
And you have a stark, sober mind to hold them. So again, it's you're special, and that's what inspires him.
Yeah.
Defends him from the bullies, right? There's a part where I think de Gonsten pushes him down, he falls 20 feet, and then Lymond throws a sleeper slop bucket at de Gonsten.
Yeah.
So like he literally is like defending him from the bullies and picking on the bullies who pick on him. Like this is your like high school dream.
Yeah.
I was just going to mention like the fact that all of these like high-ranking French nobles put so much import into this sort of silly game that's very risky. I mean, they're drunk. Any one of them could fall off the roofs and die. And we
Yeah.
do see like a lot of the pairs sort of like bow out early and they're like, yeah, this isn't for me. But like you see the Bourbon brothers are super into it. Saint-André and Degenstan almost win the whole thing. And like it's cutthroat. They're like cutting each other's ropes and stuff like that. Like it's the silly game. It doesn't matter who wins in the end. There's no prize to be had, but they're putting so much import into this.
I
Like-
mean, because they're just bored rich guys who don't have like nothing is high stakes for them in a sense, and so it's high stakes. Like,
But also in
And I
some
guess
degree
they also
they're
don't want to be beaten by the musician, you know? That would be kind of embarrassing. Like, we've got to beat this guy. He's just our servant.
well, I think also they're all competitive with each other too, because they're all actually rivals at the court. So it's like their on the court rivalry comes out in this like game rivalry. It's like the, you know, jousting and whatever, all the fake fighting that's like a stand-in for real fighting. They're very competitive, but yeah, they're young, aggressive, adrenaline-filled men.
and they do have high stakes things in their lives. Like if they piss off the king, they can lose everything, you know, or if, you know, Diane sort of sets herself up against them, they could be in trouble. Or if, you know, if the de Guises lose power, they could be in trouble, you know. So it's, yeah, it just, I don't know, maybe this is like a break. It's a totally different kind of contest that they can lose themselves in. I don't know.
I was fully expecting somebody to purposely try and kill Tatty Boy in this. Like, getting into this chapter as it started ramping up, I thought, oh, there's going to be an assassin and he's after Tatty Boy and he's one of the people that's running. That didn't happen. That's just where my mind went in the beginning.
Do you still think that Robin Stewart is complicit?
No.
He certainly had a chance to kill Lymond.
He did. I don't know. I don't want him to be, but I can see evidence if he's working with D'Aubigny that he is behind some stuff. And I just don't know.
So my thought is, I don't think he is. And I think if he was before, I think the row with D'Aubigny was him saying, F you, I'm not doing this anymore. So maybe he was before, but I really don't think he is now.
Yeah, and if he was before, this night could have been the thing that opened his eyes and be like, I don't want to be this person anymore. I don't want to be trying to assassinate people. I don't know.
Yeah.
So another thing I enjoy in this, which I know Dee doesn't, but I enjoy, is this illustration of just how charismatic and entertaining Lymond is. So we have his inbred sense of the ludicrous never failed, and even as like all this stuff is happening, he's clowning and he's this kind of trickster agent of chaos. Like as they go by these clocks, he makes the clocks somehow untimely and indecent. He swings the shutters. He just kind of like just all this like funny trickstery stuff along the way.
Locks up the one guy's chimney because he was complaining about how loud they were being.
Yeah, and then someone plays a guitar and he dances with the chimney. Like he's just playing and he's funny. And he's making Robin crack up, and Robin is laughing his ass off at all of these antics.
Right. Well, I want to say, like, it's not that I don't find that stuff entertaining. I just think that it's juvenile in a way that I don't like in real life. Like, this thing would totally piss me off in real life.
Oh yeah.
So, like, I find the writing of it entertaining. Like it was a good car chase, you know, and I enjoy a good car chase. But I just found the entire thing annoying from a character sense. Like, I feel like Lymond, like Philippe said, it's just another sign that he's spiraling downhill. Like, he's a better character than this, a better person than this. And so it's just me being like, what the hell is going on with you? Snap. I want to be like Cher in Moonstruck, like, snap out of it.
Well,
what do you
this also brings up the question of mystery that we've had since the beginning, is how old is Lymond? Because this seems like something that a younger, more immature person would do, especially while under intoxicating or being intoxicated.
This literally feels like 17-year-old boys who haven't graduated high school yet.
Yeah.
Who are like trying to prove themselves at like drinking games and jumping off roofs, literally. You know,
since he's been on vacation in France, and like we've seen him like do super serious stuff in in Scotland in the last book, and then he spent 2 years on like a slave galley ship. Like, maybe he's just having his fun now.
Yeah.
Well, you also said he's spiraling. So that also implies like something darker could be going on. I mean, do you have any thoughts on what that might be?
I mean, how much weight and pressure does he feel that really serious outcomes depend on his behavior and his choices? And I mean, a lot. Like, he's been under a lot of pressure for years before that, torture and, you know, like trauma, serious trauma. Before that, like in a affair with what is probably a much older woman that had serious consequences. So like, you know, if we're dealing with years of him desperately trying to keep up with everything and not let his world fall apart, you know, maybe he just broke.
Right. Once the pressure kind of comes off in a way, this is like when he starts feeling all the consequences of all that trauma that he was powering through to get to the end of the last book.
Yeah. And he saved his brother. You know, he was able to, like, he was successful in the last book. His reputation, like, the truth came out about his reputation. He saved his brother. So now all of that is released. And yeah.
I mean, he could just be drowning his pain. He's drinking a lot. Like, I think he obviously thought he could control it and keep faking and just drinking, you know, a little bit and pretending to drink a lot, but more and more he's out of control.
And which is especially the case tonight. Like, this isn't one of those things where he's not nearly as drunk as you think he is. Not tonight.
Yeah, he's definitely drunk. So a couple other things I notice in here is the way, even in the midst of all of this irresponsibility, he actually does take some responsibility for Robin, which is when he insists on tying the rope between the two of them. And he kind of gives him these instructions, you know, do exactly what I do, you know, and for once he's kind of sober and serious when he says this. So he is at least trying to keep Robin safe. And then there's this moment where he smiled suddenly, a carefree, friendly, uncalculated smile, and then begins the ascent. And I think it's like this carefree smile is a big part of how he manages to inspire Robin. It's this thing that he can do that inspires the emotion of the people following him, and it's this kind of power he has as a leader. All right, I talked about that. Oh. I told Duncan you were worth 10 of him.
Mm-hmm.
I also
yeah.
I love this bit. So after that climbing scene is over, that Saint-Andre has sort of been thinking this entire time, like, if he can just make it to this tight wire, then he's kind of home free because nobody can cut it, because, you know, he's such a good friend of the king, and if they cut it, it's murder. And so if he can just get on the wire, then he'll be fine. And then there's a donkey, which is just like, it's like his whole plan just got wrecked.
And that is so this book. It's this most ridiculous book. The whale expels a bloody lamb that's going to kill the queen. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
A donkey comes down a tightrope just when you least expect it.
Oh, I guess I better back up.
Also, there's a moment I just find this very moving. There's this. This is right after Lymond says, "I told Dongan you were worth 10 of him," and it says, "There stirred in Stewart something life-giving, a surprised gratitude for what Taddy had tried to do, a fierce pride in what he himself had done. Strong, confident, and free, for one evening, envious of no man, Robin Stewart followed his leader up and into the belfry."
I underline that too.
Lymond has created a lifelong love in this person who wants desperately to have a leader to inspire him. Does he know what to do with this power?
Yeah. It's slightly ominous to me.
And then, well, I can actually tell you why. There's some hints in here. So throughout the rest of this section, we're mostly in Robin's point of view. We have Taddy now referred to as his friend. This is like the first friend he's ever had. And again, he keeps saying his friend.
Robin.
And then we have, I think the end of this, it's on 196. The rooftop race is over and it's kind of the aftermath before the next scene. Full of drink and success and his new frail fledgling trust, the archer stood over him. So he believes that this is his friend. And remember, it's not like he's making this up. Lymond said, "Friend Robin, come with me." So he offered what seemed to be a genuine friendship. And this is where now, like, again, Robin, who has been bullied, who probably, as we know, right, because the way he warns about the court, they're just going to chew you up and spit you out. He doesn't trust because he's been betrayed. People tease him and bully him. They pretend to be his friend and then they screw him over. So he actually has opened up and is letting himself trust Taddy Boy. But then we have this moment where, again, it says his friend Taddy Boy was able to put something of its proper value on this newfound and unwanted solicitude. And then we have Stewart's unpracticed, eager emotion carried him forward too quickly. So he feels this so intensely that he goes too far. He pushes it beyond where he should push it. And he says, "Can I come to Ireland with you?" And then it says, Stewart heard what he had wanted to hear. "If you wish to," said Taddy Boy slowly. And so we have Robin hearing, like, we have this bond, maybe we're going to run away together. And all Lymond is doing is like, I need to get out of this scene and go to the next scene. Like, I just need to get rid of this guy.
He's like, if you want to come, you can come. But it's not like, yes, come with me, which is what Robin heard.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not Ireland.
Yeah. And then we get this really great scene, actually, with Jenny that I loved. Where
you loved it because you hate Jenny and Lymond tells Jenny off.
Basically.
I felt annoyance with Jenny. I don't know if I hate her. I just find her suspicious and annoying. And I find her lack of care for her people who depend on her to be not, I don't respect her. So, but Lymond realizes that she, rightfully so, that she doesn't have care for the young queen and she doesn't pay attention to things. And so he figures out that he sort of pushes her because he thinks there's a way that the arsenic could get to the young queen because of her negligence. And so he keeps pushing her until she finally says, "Oh yeah, there's this candy we made," you know, and so he's like, "What?" And so they pull out this candy and test it and have a dog eat it, and it does turn out to be poison. So, and they made it, like Jenny made it with the kids, but there's this implication that several people knew about it. There's this time that the room is unguarded when she's with the king. So it's not necessarily saying that Jenny is poisoning the queen, although a couple people say that. They say that might be possible. I don't think that that's necessarily what the text is telling us, but her negligence made it possible. So.
I think there's an interesting bit here. Lymond strode to the window and stayed there, gripping his anger hard until he could speak. He's so angry he can't speak. That's a pretty intense emotional reaction from Lymond.
Yeah.
And he does have a temper. It's one of those things like you pick up, you know, as you read, but more and more. Like because it occurred to me one time, like, wow, he really does have a temper. And then I started noticing it all the time.
And she's just so selfish and careless. Like she's both selfish, only focused on her own pleasure, and careless, completely just not expending any energy at all to pay attention or care for others. And it makes him angry. I don't blame him. Yeah. And I do like this bit in the middle of 198 where it says, fat, battered, and dirty, a hireling, an adventurer, a guest in her room, he showed not one shred of the mercy he had shown to a Scots archer. So it does kind of put this like a little bit of a comparison with Robin, where it shows like he was paying attention to Robin a little bit. Like he showed a little bit of mercy to Robin, and he doesn't care at all to show that to Jenny. So, yeah, because she kind of did the whole, do you know who I am? Like played that card, and he's just not having it. And it was like, you're a bastard. You're having a bastard. Like the king's not going to care about you. It just gives her this rundown of who Dion is and how like there's no way you're going to replace this woman, and you're delusional for thinking that you will. And yeah. So, and she's kind of like, you want to bet, and he's like, that's ridiculous. So yeah, anyway, she kind of tries to say like, you don't know how things work, and he kind of looks at her and he's like, I know exactly how things work. And
Yes, he does. He certainly knows how the love affairs of the French court work.
Yep. Yeah. So finally he pushes her at the bottom of 199, and he's like, do you think we shouldn't, you know, she's perfectly safe. Do you think we shouldn't hear? And he's, no, said Lymond brutally. I don't think. What could be done with that arsenic? And he's just like, tell me. And she finally is like, I suppose there's the sweets, this. And so he figures it out. Yeah, so there's boxes of candy, and the implication I think is in one of the lower boxes that they hadn't gotten to yet was sprinkled with arsenic because it's got powdered sugar all over it. And so somebody could have just sprinkled the arsenic. So I think the way the candy's described, the arsenic does not have to be in the candy. So it doesn't have to be like Lady Fleming didn't have to put the arsenic in the candy when they made it. Somebody could have come along and sprinkled arsenic over the candy and it wouldn't have been noticed. So
it would have to be somebody that knew, number one, that the Dowager Queen wasn't letting Mary have candy anymore, and that Jenny was.
Right. Somebody would have to know the candy was there. Somebody would have to have access to the room to poison the candy, and they would have to know when the room is unguarded. And there's, yeah, so. And it would have to be somebody who, if they got caught in that space, it wouldn't be weird. Like, so yeah. And the dog died, so the candy was poisoned.
Also, Lymond is so cold-hearted after Lewis to go kill another dog. And he does have this line of like, well, it's a really old dog, so put it out of its misery. But like, damn.
I mean, I guess they had to give it to somebody, and they couldn't give it to like a poison tester because they're pretty sure it's poisoned. So I don't know what he was gonna do, but yeah, it is kind of sad. So let's see. We had this interesting interaction with do we want to move on from the Lady Jenny? Anything else about
I have no more to say about the Lady Jenny scene.
All right. We have sort of an interesting interaction with Dooley, who is kind of offended on the behalf of Olimro. And he kind of speaks more than we've seen it. This is the most we've seen from him the entire book. So that's kind of fun. Apparently some people tried to attack Olimro, and he got hurt, and he's staying at Una's. And yeah, so he's gonna go with them to Nuve. Yeah.
So there's a couple. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. What were you gonna point out?
Well, I was gonna say a couple observations on this scene. One is that Olimro was attacked by apparently the wrestlers who were at court that evening, and one of them was probably the Cornishman. So just remember that. Cornishman wrestler, not a good guy. Also, Taddy shut the door, and the fumes of strong wine from his clothes, stiff with spilled drink and dried sweat, filled the room. So he's a mess, and also that wine motif again. And on 201, we have Lymond coming back to his room and actually blundering on the way there, like crossing the passage. So he's like so exhausted and drunk that and I don't think he's even that drunk anymore because he'd spent a while talking to Jenny. So I think he's just exhausted.
Yeah, he ran over rooftops forever.
Yeah. And then we have, Robin Stewart had remembered it with pleasure. Jenny Fleming as yet knew nothing about it, but Lymond had lived that evening with the memory of Una O'Dwyer's serenade and the knowledge that there awaited him in his room neither sleep nor peace but the Prince of Barrow. So this whole time, and especially in this whole rooftop race where he's had this amazing joie de vivre and Robin has fallen, so infatuated with him, he wasn't living the joy. He was worrying about what was going to happen when he got back to Olimro. Because he totally screwed up Olimro's romantic situation.
Yeah.
And he's a really good actor because reading that scene, you wouldn't be thinking, this is a guy who's worrying a lot about what Olimro's going to think.
Right. So I have a question about the very end of this chapter where it says, so Dooley leaves, has risen to go. And Lymond says, as for me, there have been enough scapegoats and a damn nuisance they are. From this time on, God help me, I shall be my own bait. They left, and as dawn lit the scuffed tileless and broken the well-trodden roofs of Blois, and pricked at the eyelids of its weary sleep-ridden citizens, Francis Crawford of Lymond at last rolled into bed. So when he says, God help me, I shall be my own bait, do we think, this is not a question for Laura, is he going to reveal himself in the next chapter? Like, is he going to be like, hey, I'm Francis Lymond, come and get me if you want to? Like, is that what's going to happen?
It's a possibility. I don't think he would, but I guess maybe in order to sort of out the would-be assassin, maybe that's the plan he's coming up with.
Maybe? Like, I don't know. Like, that's what it seems to imply, but that also seems like it would cause a whole bunch of other problems.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily think that would be in Mary Queen of Scots' best interest either.
Right. Isn't
because
it?
That would disavow the Queen Dowager, and I don't know.
Yeah. It seems like his role as Taddy Boy is useful in more ways than just, drawing out this assassin. Although maybe if they draw out the assassin, then the Queen will be safe. And so if he's the bait, then they can figure it out. And then, I don't know.
So I have a couple other observations. One is just the complete exhaustion of Lymond. We actually have him measuring the distance between the fireplace and the bed. Like he's so exhausted, he doesn't even know if he can walk 3 steps or whatever. And then one other observation that we kind of skipped over was on 196 when it's Robin talking to Towdy Boy at the end of the rooftop race, and he says, he's talking about the French court and a Liam Rowe, and saying, leave, O Liam Rowe. They'll spoil you, the lot of them. It's recognition I know of a sort, the kind I once thought I was desperate to have, but it'll wreck you, body and mind. Better find an honest master and do an honest day's work, and if success comes, you can be proud of it. So it seems to be saying that he's changed his mind from where he was at the beginning of the book, where what he wanted was recognition and success. And now he's saying it's better, like an honest job is better than recognition.
So maybe he's growing a little bit. His priorities are changing. That should be good.
Yeah.
So so we have Lymond starting to fall apart. We have an amazing rooftop race. We have Jenny being irresponsible, and maybe Lymond is going to reveal himself as bait. Any final comments on this chapter, or guesses or expectations or things you want to see in the next one?
Well, not to harp on the Jenny thing, because I know you're not fond of her. She's also pregnant, which I don't think we mentioned.
No, we
oh
didn't
yeah, that's right.
cover that part. And she thinks that that's going to sort of put Dion out. That
Yeah.
she got like, no, honey, that's not how it's going to work.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if that's going to cause another political strain. Like, she's not going to displace Dion or the Queen. So is that just going to make the de Guises, put strain on Mary de Guise?
Well, I do think part of why Lymond is so angry at Jenny is he says your behavior will reflect poorly on Mary, Queen of Scots. So it's like she's not just being irresponsible, she's like reflecting poorly on the nation of Scotland and its queen.
Yeah. So it's just going to cause another strain and another thing that they have to deal with. So.
Yep. Yeah. Anything else?
I just want to find out who the villain is, which I'm sure we will eventually. I mean, I think we're onto something, so.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that Lymond's gonna reveal himself. I mean, maybe he is. He's obviously known in France, so.
It feels a little early for that to happen.
Yes, but I kind of want it to happen. Like, I want to see him interact with the French court as himself and see what that looks like. And like, I'll be sad if we get to the end of the book and that hasn't happened. Like, if he stays Towdy Boy the entire book, I'll be sad about that. Like, I would like to see him be like, it's me. Like, not the
Where do you think this whole Towdy Boy thing is going?
I don't know. It's intriguing. It's the mask has got to come off at some point. Like, there's no way we're gonna end this book and there hasn't been a reveal. So just like in the scene with George Douglas, like he's taking the mask off and putting it on and all that. So there's got to be some point where he takes it off. I hope it's not the last scene of the book. Like, I'd like to see some story happen with that, but who knows?
We shall see. Anything else?
No.
Thank you, everyone.
Hi, guys.